Open this ranch door now, or I'm calling the cops on your wife. Our HOA president, Victoria Sterling, stood at my property entrance, shaking with fury. For months, she'd been demanding access to inspect my 20-acre ranch, claiming safety violations that didn't exist. When my wife refused to unlock our gates without a warrant, Victoria pulled out her phone. 911, a dangerous woman is threatening me at Thompson Ranch. Pure lies. But Victoria didn't know who my wife really was. She didn't know what would happen when those cops arrived. Ever had an HOA president target your property, comment on your story? The morning everything started, I was up at 5:30 a.m., like always feeding the chickens and watching the sunrise paint golden streaks across Willow Oak Ranch, 20 acres of heaven that had been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather bought this land with his savings from the war, every penny he'd scraped together going into this soil. My father expanded it, adding the barn and the greenhouse. Now it was my turn to keep the legacy alive, though I never imagined I'd be fighting a different kind of war. The rooster crowed as I scattered organic feed, and I couldn't help but smile at the familiar chaos. After 10 years as a software engineer staring at screens until my eyes burned and my soul felt empty, this simple life felt like winning the lottery every single morning. Elena was already awake, rushing around our bedroom in her crisp business suit, her phone buzzing constantly on the dresser. She looked stunning, but stressed, checking her watch every few seconds. "Big day coming, honey," she said, pausing just long enough to kiss my cheek, her perfume mixed with the smell of fresh coffee. "This weekend I'll have some amazing news to share." I caught her hand before she could dash away, feeling the tension in her fingers. "You've been so secretive lately. Is this about that big case you mentioned?" She laughed, that musical sound that made me fall for her 12 years ago, but there was something else in her eyes. "Better than that. Just trust me, okay?" The way her eyes sparkled told me she was bursting to share whatever secret she was keeping. Legal protocols, she'd always say when I pressed for details. Being married to someone in law enforcement meant getting used to secrets, but this felt different, bigger. As she grabbed her keys, I noticed her checking her phone again, her expression shifting to something I couldn't quite read. Professional, determined. "Remember," she said, turning back at the door, "whatever happens in the next few days, we're in this together." Strange thing to say over breakfast, but before I could ask what she meant, she was gone, leaving me with the chickens and a nagging feeling that something was about to change. 2 months ago, Victoria Sterling had shown up at our gate with a smile and a proposition. "Mr. Thompson," she'd said, her voice sweet as artificial honey, "have you ever considered what this land could be worth? I have connections in development. We could make you a very wealthy man." I'd politely declined, explaining that the farm wasn't for sale at any price. Her smile had faltered just a fraction. "Everything has a price," she'd said before leaving. "You'll see." I should have recognized the threat in those words, but I was naive then, believing that property rights and 3 generations of history meant something. Now at 8 a.m. sharp, I heard the unmistakable click-clack of expensive heels on gravel. Victoria was marching up my driveway like she owned it, with Robert Hayes trailing behind her like a reluctant shadow. She wore a coral blazer that probably cost more than I made in a month. Her platinum blonde hair shellacked into a helmet that defied the morning breeze. Robert looked uncomfortable in his gray suit, constantly adjusting his tie like it was choking him. I noticed something else too. A black SUV parked just outside our property line, engine running, tinted windows, making it impossible to see who was inside. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," Victoria said, each word dripping with false courtesy. "We need to discuss the situation with your farm." I straightened up from the tomato plants, keeping my voice pleasant despite the warning bells going off in my head. "What situation would that be, Victoria?" She wrinkled her nose dramatically, gesturing at the chicken coop like it was a toxic waste site. "The smell, for starters. Several residents have complained about the odor from your livestock. And the noise. Those roosters start at ungodly hours. It's affecting property values." I noticed she had a small camera clipped to her blazer, the red light indicating it was recording. Everything about this felt like a setup. "This is a working farm, Victoria," I said calmly. "It's been here since 1948, long before the neighborhood was developed. We have protections under the original owner rights statute." Her smile tightened, and I saw her exchange a quick glance with Robert. "Times change, Mr. Thompson. This isn't 1948 anymore. Our community has standards, and your operation is dragging down the entire neighborhood's value." Robert shifted his weight, avoiding my eyes. I'd always felt sorry for him. a 64-year-old retired lawyer who seemed to have lost his backbone somewhere along the way. I'd met his daughter once at the hardware store. She'd looked at her father with such disappointment, it made my heart hurt. That evening's HOA meeting was standing room only. The community center smelled like burnt coffee and tension, the fluorescent lights harsh against worried faces. I'd spent hours reviewing county ordinances and HOA bylaws until my eyes crossed. In my briefcase, I had copies of everything: the original owner protection statute, our farm's historical documents, tax records going back 70 years. I waited my turn as Victoria held court at the head table, her painted nails tapping against her folder, while resident after resident brought their concerns to the board. Most were obviously planted complaints people I'd never seen before, suddenly worried about property values and agricultural smells. When my name was called, I stood and made my case with the confidence of someone who knew the law was on their side. According to County Ordinance 1247, properties engaged in agricultural use prior to HOA establishment maintain exemption from regulations pertaining to livestock operational hours and agricultural practices. I passed out copies to the board members, noting how several wouldn't meet my eyes. Willow Oak Ranch has been in continuous operation since 1948. Here are the original deeds, tax records, and aerial photographs proving continuous agricultural use. The room went silent. Victoria's face had turned an interesting shade that clashed with her coral blazer. She had no choice. The law was crystal clear. With visible reluctance, she announced the withdrawal of all complaints against my property. But as people started to leave, she smiled. It wasn't a defeated smile. It was the smile of a chess player who'd just sacrificed a pawn to set up checkmate. Robert stood, pulling out a thick folder I hadn't seen before. "If I may," he said, his lawyer voice stronger than his everyday one. "I'd like to bring attention to Amendment 47B passed in our 2019 annual meeting." He began reading. "All properties, regardless of exemption status, must submit to monthly safety and health inspections if any commercial activity is conducted on the premises." My heart sank. We sold eggs and vegetables at the farmer's market. That counted as commercial activity. "These inspections," Robert continued, "will be conducted by HOA-appointed inspectors to ensure compliance with community health standards." The vote was called immediately. 7-3. It passed. Victoria's smile widened as she made the announcement. "First inspection will be Monday at 7 a.m. sharp. I'll be personally overseeing it to ensure everything is done properly. Don't be late, Mr. Thompson." As the room emptied, she walked past me, her heels clicking on the linoleum. "You should have taken my offer," she whispered, but Victoria's smile as she left the meeting. That smile haunted me. What did she know that I didn't? Comment below if you've ever seen that. I've already won smile, because what happened next Monday morning? Monday arrived with the kind of crisp morning that should have been perfect for farm work. I'd been up since 4:30 making sure everything was spotless. The chicken coops were cleaner than most restaurants I'd eaten in. The vegetable rows looked like they'd been planted with a ruler. I'd even pressure washed the gravel driveway, though I knew it was pointless. This wasn't really about cleanliness or safety. This was about power, and Victoria Sterling was about to show me just how much she had. Elena watched me over her coffee cup, already dressed in her business suit, despite the early hour. There was something different about her this morning, an alertness like a cat watching a mouse hole. "Remember," she said, setting down her Wisconsin Badgers mug, "stay calm no matter what happens today, and record everything on your phone, every word, every action." I kissed her goodbye, tasting coffee and concern on her lips. "It's just an inspection," I said, trying to convince myself more than her. "What's the worst that could happen?" She gave me a long look, her hand lingering on my cheek. "With Victoria Sterling, anything. Just promise me you'll keep your cool. No matter what she does, no matter what she says, don't give her any ammunition." I promised, though something in her tone made my stomach clench. She knew something I didn't, but before I could ask, she was gone, her car disappearing down the drive. At exactly 7 a.m., Victoria's white Mercedes pulled up, followed by a beat-up truck I didn't recognize. She stepped out wearing designer heels, completely unsuitable for a farm. White, of course, probably to show any speck of dirt. Behind her, Robert emerged looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, his shoulders hunched in his gray suit. From the truck came a younger man who looked like he'd ordered his entire outfit from Inspector Costume online. Aviator sunglasses at 7 a.m., clipboard at the ready, an attitude that screamed newly given authority. "This is our certified inspector," Victoria announced with a flourish. "My cousin perfectly qualified to assess health and safety standards." I looked at his credentials, a printout from some online course that probably took an hour to complete, if that. The certificate was dated 3 days ago. "This isn't a licensed agricultural inspector," I said, keeping my voice level. "State law requires specific certifications for farm inspections." Victoria's smile never wavered, but I saw her hand move to her phone in her pocket. "The HOA bylaws state we can appoint any inspector we deem qualified. Harold is qualified by our standards, and that's all that matters." She moved toward the gate, her cousin and Robert flanking her, like the world's most reluctant security detail. "Now we need to inspect all areas of your property. The coops, the compost area, storage sheds, your home's kitchen, where you process eggs, everything." "I'm sorry," I said, standing firmly in front of my gate, "but without a court order I can't allow access to my property. You're welcome to observe from here, but entering private property requires proper legal authority." I kept my hands visible and my voice calm, just like Elena had coached me. "Are you refusing to comply with an HOA mandated inspection?" Victoria's voice rose pitched to carry to the neighbors, who were starting to peek out their windows. "I'm exercising my property rights," I replied. "If you want to enter private property, you need proper legal authority. That's not just HOA rules, that's state law." That's when Victoria played her card. She took a step forward, and I raised my hand in a clear stop gesture, palm out the universal sign for maintaining distance. I was careful not to move toward her, not to make any motion that could be construed as aggressive. But Victoria was ready for this. She'd probably practiced it in her mirror. She stumbled backward dramatically, crying out as if she'd been shoved. "He's threatening me. Robert, are you recording this?" Robert was indeed recording, his phone shaking slightly in his hands. But the angle he was filming from would make it look like I'd moved aggressively toward Victoria instead of simply standing my ground. I saw him swallow hard, his face pale. "I need help," Victoria screamed, her phone already at her ear. "There's a dangerous man here threatening my life. He won't let me leave." Which was absurd. Her car was right behind her, running with nothing between her and it but her own drama. I stood frozen, realizing I'd walked right into her trap. "Victoria, you're free to leave any time." But she was already deep into her performance with the dispatcher, her voice climbing into hysteria. "Willowbrook Estates, Thompson Ranch. He's aggressive and I'm terrified for my safety. Please hurry, he's moving toward me." I hadn't moved an inch, but that didn't matter. She gave the performance of her life, complete with trembling voice and what looked like real tears. The cousin Harold stood there looking deeply uncomfortable, clearly not briefed on this part of the plan. He kept adjusting his sunglasses and looking between Victoria and me like he was watching a tennis match he didn't understand. Robert kept filming, but I noticed his expression. He looked sick, like a man watching something he knew was wrong, but felt powerless to stop. 15 minutes later, 2 police cruisers pulled up, with lights flashing, but no sirens, a detail that told me they weren't treating this as a real emergency. The officers who stepped out looked tired, like they'd dealt with too many of these calls. Officer Martinez approached me while Officer Johnson went to Victoria. "Sir, we received a call about threats and aggressive behavior." Martinez said, his tone suggesting this wasn't his first HOA drama rodeo. I kept my hands visible and my voice calm. "Officer, I simply refuse to allow them onto my property without proper authorization. I never touched anyone or made any threats. I have security cameras that recorded the entire interaction." I gestured to the cameras mounted on our gateposts, making sure he saw them. Meanwhile, Victoria was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance for Officer Johnson, complete with hand-wringing and dramatic gestures. The way he moved toward me, I've never been so frightened. My phone buzzed. "Elena." "I'm watching on our security cameras," she said quickly when I answered. "Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything. Just stay calm." Her voice had an edge I'd never heard before, professional, cold, controlled. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm fine. Just remember, everything is being recorded, not just by them, by us, by others. This is bigger than just us, Marcus." The way she said it made me wonder what else she knew. The officers took statements from everyone, looking increasingly annoyed as they realized this was a civil matter blown out of proportion. "Ma'am," Officer Johnson finally said to Victoria, his patience clearly wearing thin, "I don't see any evidence of threats or violence. This seems to be a property dispute that should be handled through proper channels." Victoria's face fell, but she quickly recovered. "Well, I certainly felt threatened. The way he raised his hand, which our cameras will show was a defensive gesture while I maintained my position, I interrupted. Both officers looked relieved. We'll file a report, Martinez said, giving both parties a stern look. But I'm advising both parties to keep their distance and handle this through proper legal channels. Any more calls like this could result in charges for false reporting. He gave Victoria a meaningful look at that last part. As the police drove away, Victoria stayed behind, surrounded by neighbors who'd come out to watch the drama. She was already spinning the story, her voice carrying clearly across the morning air. You all saw how aggressive he was. This man is dangerous. We have a right to feel safe in our own community. What if he threatens someone else? What if there are children around next time? The police drove away, but Victoria stayed surrounded by neighbors, painting me as a dangerous man. My phone buzzed. 47 missed calls from customers, but it was the 48th call that changed everything. Have you ever had your reputation destroyed in minutes? Type yes if you know that feeling, because this was just the beginning. By noon that Monday, Victoria had turned social media into her personal war room. A new community group appeared online, Safe Willowbrook, and within 2 hours it had 300 members. She had posted the carefully edited video Robert had shot, cropped to show only my raised hand, and her stumbling backward. The caption read, "Violent farmer threatens HOA president. During routine inspection, is your family safe?" The comments section exploded with vitriol from people I'd never met, calling me unstable, dangerous, suggesting I should be arrested or have my farm shut down immediately. I watched 10 years of reputation building crumble in real time, each refresh, bringing new accusations and threats. The emails started next, sent to the HOA's complete mailing list of over 500 residents. Dear concerned neighbors, Victoria's message began. Following this morning's frightening incident, we feel it's our duty to warn you about the aggressive behavior displayed by Mr. Thompson. For your safety and that of your children, we recommend avoiding the Thompson Ranch until further notice. We are exploring all legal options to ensure our community remains safe. By evening, I'd lost 40% of my farmers market customers. People who had bought from me for years suddenly canceled their weekly orders with vague excuses or no explanation at all. The organic grocery store that had been stocking our eggs for 5 years called to say they were reassessing their supplier relationships. I knew I had to fight back somehow, but how do you fight lies that spread faster than truth? That evening, I decided to go live on our farm's social media page. No script, no editing, just me standing in front of the chicken coop telling my side. Folks, I want to address what happened today. I began trying to keep my voice steady. An HOA inspection turned into a false 911 call, and now my family's livelihood is under attack. Here's the unedited security footage from our farm cameras. I played the whole incident, showing clearly how I'd simply stood at my gate while Victoria performed her dramatic stumble. The stream exploded. 500 viewers became 1,000, then 1,500. Comments poured in supporting me, sharing their own HOA horror stories, expressing outrage at Victoria's tactics. But even as support grew, I could see the damage spreading faster than truth could catch up. Local news had picked up the story, and of course they led with the sensational angle. HOA president allegedly threatened at local farm. They buried my response in the last paragraph. That's when Dorothy Williams knocked on my door. At 70, Dorothy had lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone except my family. She'd been my third-grade teacher, and she still had that way of making you feel like she could see straight through to your soul. She settled into our kitchen chair with her usual green tea, her weathered hands wrapped around the mug. "Marcus," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of secrets, "I need to tell you something about Victoria Sterling." She paused, choosing her words like she was picking apples, carefully, deliberately. 40 years ago, I taught her in high school. She was a bright girl, ambitious, always talking about making something of herself. But something changed when she got into real estate. The money, the power, it twisted her into someone I hardly recognize. Dorothy leaned forward, her voice dropping. 3 families have sold their properties to her below market value in the last 5 years. The Johnsons on Oak Street, she hit them with violation after violation until they couldn't afford the fine.